Can you help explain this? How does nature subsidize?
So in 2014 or 15, there was a report that was published by True Cost that about 7 trillion worth of natural subsidies are given to companies. There are inputs that are never priced on the balance sheet. So companies receive them as inputs, as resources, whether it is air, free water, or forestry or trees or crops that are taken, but the full price, the full economic cost has not been paid. So there is a subsidy from the nature's side as well, right?
Okay.
There is also a subsidy that the companies receive from on the governance point of view, which is trust. Companies receive trust as a factor for them to do any business, right? They have a license that they receive from the regulator. Obviously, they need to pass certain conditions, but beyond that, there is a trust that if somebody is doing that in the future, they will not betray the society or betray the regulators. So companies run on a very massive foundation, a huge amount of subsidy and investments being given by the society across ESG. Now, if therefore companies have that, receive that investment, they are also accountable and responsible to give a return on that, or at least give an account. Now, there are established ways to do this. There are reporting frameworks, there are the annual report filings, there are audits, and now there are ESG reporting frameworks and ESG reported audits, etc. But beyond that, there are not everything, not all the cost is actually accounted for in the balance sheet. If you look at the balance sheet, the natural subsidy is not showing, the tax subsidy and social subsidy is not showing, and the trust subsidy. That's why there is the term also trust deficit. There is a social issue as well. We're just focusing on one aspect of the social issue. Actually, two aspects. One, on the customer side, there is a lack of inclusion. Not all legitimate customers are getting supported or serviced by the company. So look at pharma industry, for example. Pharma industry is focusing majority of its efforts on making medicines for people that have the so-called lifestyle diseases, the rich diseases, diabetes, heart diseases, etc. But more than 99% of diseases in the poor world or developing world, they don't even have a medicine. There's not even research happening. That's why there is an initiative called Access to Essential Medicines that came out as a need in the society.
Okay.
Now, so that is on the customer side, but on the labor side also, if you look at, the rich and poor income divide gap, has been increasing globally, and even in India after the reforms that happened in 1991, the trend has been divergent trend. We have a slide, we shared it in the ET masterclass as well as in the webinar. So till 2014, the data shows clearly that the divide has been increasing massively. So basically, and then if you go to the environment, we are very clear, 70% biodiversity has been lost in the last 300 years. We have destroyed forests, we have destroyed trees, we have destroyed half the world's population of birds. The water is getting destroyed in the oceans. Plastics are being dumped there. Even in the space, we are dumping a lot of garbage, right? Leftover satellites and so on. So if you look at, now where is this coming from? Now obviously, if you look at the economic engine of the world, there is some amount of spending the governments are doing. But the biggest amount of spending or investment or production is coming from the corporate sector. There are 3 million corporates in the world, approximately. So they are the biggest economic driver. Now, if that biggest economic driver is not measuring what matters, there was a great management, Peter Drucker, guru, who said what gets measured gets managed, right? Yeah. If you're not even accounting, if you're not even measuring the true cost of doing business to the society, first of all, to the business itself, if business does not know what is its true cost on the environment side, on the social side, on the governance side, it can never manage. There is no way for them to manage. So even projects that get measured, or investment initiatives, or P&Ls that get planned for the next 5-10 years, they are not reliable, they are not accurate, they are not realistic. So therefore, we can be sure that we are not covering that ground. So if you go to the basics, first thing we need to do is start covering that ground, start having a realistic P&L.
Okay.
And even in this,
what does that mean?
So even the regulatory standards that we have right now are not sufficient, by the way. That is there is a good news in this and there's a bad news. Good news is there's a lot of ESG regulation now. Thankfully, it helps us take the first step. But it's a journey of 1,000 miles that has begun with the first step, but it's just the first step. We have to take 9,999 more steps, which means we have to take to a true and holistic accounting, first of all. Then the board and the chairman.
Sure. How does that happen? Then how do we take air, water, I don't know, trees, crops, forests?
We need to
How do
start
we take-
pricing them. We need to start pricing them and taking them in the balance sheet, in the P&L straight away, right away.
How would that happen? How do we determine the economic value of having Uttarakhand, which is 50-60% forest?
So there is the national accounts also, by the way, state accounts, district accounts, country accounts also should be holistic. So we should measure how much is the natural capital we have, by the way, because it's a balance sheet. Every balance sheet has credits and debits. So here what is happening is, in the state of Uttarakhand, sticking to your example, we have so much natural capital, we have perhaps little financial capital, but we are doing a transfer entry. We are converting our natural resources and bringing them into cash and then spending it on projects. But we must show the deficit there. We must show how much trees we are taking over, how much water we are using, how much land we are using. So if we start doing a true accounting of this in the public sector and in the private sector, then we at least have a truthful map. We have feet on the ground.
So you're saying, I mean, firstly, governments are not doing this. Firstly, governments have to start saying, for example, the Amazon forest is being disappearing or has been disappearing, or natural forests, thousands and thousands of millions of years old, are being replaced by palm trees in Indonesia and Malaysia to do palm oil. I mean, governments have to start that. Countries have to start that first, right? Not only perhaps measure GDP. So without being there, we are bringing it down to corporations.
Exactly. So we have to do it consistently everywhere, because it's unfair for us to ask the companies to do it when we are not doing it in the other sector, because it doesn't make for a like-to-like comparison.
Okay. I mean, what you're saying then is that the governments continue to measure themselves on GDP and report GDP internationally, but companies somehow have to now report on things like gross happiness index and whatever, Bhutan and other things like that. It's almost like saying that, right?
But that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying governments should also incorporate these reporting dimensions.
Okay.
It does not matter. We see, it's not a fight for standards and benchmarks. I'm not saying follow a particular standard. I'm not here to promote a standard. We can build an Indian standard. We can build a state standard. We can build an Indian standard. But there are tools available. There are principles available, scientific principles that we can use to build a standard and start doing national accounts of natural capital, social capital, okay, and trust capital, which is the G part. We do it in the government, whether it is national, state, or district, and we also do it in the companies.
Yeah.
We do it consistently across everywhere. Then we will have a like-to-like comparison.
Okay, so see, that already becomes a little bit of a problem to me, because countries like US and others will start failing on this miserably. They are the highest natural resource users, and they'll probably never allow such a rating to come into governments or things like that, right?
Which is the reason why there's a massive backlash against ESG in US. If you notice, there is the massive backlash is calling it woke, calling it leftist, is precisely because there are established industries, there are established firms, especially in the investment world, we call them stranded assets, which is a technical term, but I'll explain it. It means that as investors start to notice some sectors are going to do bad because they are not making enough efforts to switch to energy efficient ways, or to switch their business models, or switch to renewable sources like fossil fuels, like others, then though investors will start to take their money out of those companies, and nobody will remain, holding those stocks.
What about a coal company? What happens to them?
They have to reinvent themselves. They have to look at.
We can't. I mean, 40% or 60% of India's energy still runs on coal.
Yes.
We badly need it.
So gradually, can we reinvent ourselves and move away from coal? Because we know it harms us, it harms the nature.
Sure, but I mean, what if we start rating Coal India, for example, then its stock price is going to crash if we were to follow ESG guidelines, because for the next 40-50 years, we don't think we can move away from coal.
Exactly. So can Coal India ask this question? Do we have to be defined as a coal company, or can we be an energy company? And can we look at capturing alternative sources of energy?
Okay, but
in that case, they will stay relevant in the next 40 years, right? Can they use? So right now they're earning a steady bit of revenue, right? How are they reinvesting that revenue, that margin that they have? Can they reinvest in doing R&D? I want to know how much R&D investment and expenditure Coal India is doing from its margins to invest in alternative sources. Look at new sources of energy, invest in some scientific research in Indian institutions, create some startup prize.
Why would you want to do that?
To look at alternatives, because we know.
Why? Let Coal India die if it's not surviving beyond 40 years.
That's an option as well.
Yeah, but why? Why is that a problem that we have to keep companies alive?
No, we don't have to keep companies. I'm saying if you are see, it depends on who's taking this decision. If it's the board of the company, they would want to stay relevant, so they can do this. Other shareholders can think about investing in other sources.
Fair enough. So it's just then a matter of a company's board saying we want to be relevant for the next 100 years. What do we need to do to keep relevant?
Exactly.
That's all.
Exactly.
So let the board decide. Why do we need ESG or any third party to guide companies on metrics? Because see, here is my problem. This is a standard or a set of standards, 500 metrics, I believe. Whether you agree with them all or no, but I believe they are there, right? 500. Yes. This is what Professor Damodaran was saying.
500 data points,
Data points that are going to be measured. Imagine the cost of measuring that. Now, I believe from one of my friends who I introduced to you, who's trying to set up an ESG consulting company and so on and so forth. Basically, the whole idea is being pushed down throats of Indian companies. All sorts of Indian companies, right? And we are only beginning now to compete in a global setting. It's being pushed down by somebody who's already made shitloads of money and is now saying, okay, I'm complying, now you guys also comply. If you comply, I will give you business. That is what is happening, right? All manufacturing companies, all sorts of Indian companies, and that was the premise of starting this ESG consulting company that this friend of mine is trying to walk the journey on. He's saying there is a ton of money to be made out there, but unless you have an ESG certificate, German companies and so on and so forth are not going to work with you. Okay, and I find that a problem, right? How will our companies even compete in that environment? And assuming they do, why should we be driven by some third party morals being imposed on us on what we need to deliver for our country? Now, I'll tell you where I'm conflicted. I'm also because those guys have adopted, and finally if we have to be in the supply chain, that's the only reason we have to comply, honestly. So it is a conflict in my mind. Yes, we need to come up. We have to make that investment simply to be globally competitive, but at the same time, it does not feel like a fair proposition which has been imposed on us, which is an emerging economy. I built a software business. I sold at book value equity to 36 people. When I exited the business, I did a gratitude bonus to 250 people. Okay, these 36 people are rich, really rich. The 250 people, tens and tens of them turned to me that because of the bonus you gave, which is unprecedented, I gave massive, okay, it wasn't small, it was massive. They actually paid their EMIs off. Some bought new homes, like without EMIs, like in a flash. It was quite a bit, okay. I made a lot of money. It is my own personal ethic based on my reading, what my sanskars are, this life, purva janma sanskar, whatever, that mujhe ye karna hai. But it is my individual choice. Why should any government or any metric impose upon me whether I give equity to others or no, whether this is not done. This is not free world anymore. You are then imposing upon me a social ethic which is nothing but socialism, and it is bound to fail.
I'm not suggesting that. So you have just proved what I am trying to establish, that the base is what anybody does.
No, base is minimum wage.
Exactly.
That's it.
Yeah. So beyond that, what you do is your personal ethics.
Yes.
So
and I must be free to measure. My board must be free to measure, define our own metrics.
100%.
You can give me indications. You can give me not indications, indicators that here is a framework we are building. Here are 6 things you may want to measure. That is it. I choose to measure or no is my choice.
Exactly.
Why must I comply to a standard? And because the entire ecosystem is being built by that standard, you are basically telling me do this or I'll screw you. You are not part of the supply chain anymore. So that is what is essentially happening by ESG.
So there is a problem with the standard itself.
Yeah,
I come from the standards and ratings industry. Spent 17 plus years in that. Okay. Worked on most of the standards. Many of these standards are not practical or realistic. And because I've seen many of them and I've built new ones, we were talking about the emerging market based standard we built in 2010. We realized that it was not, emerging market companies were not being assessed properly. Justice was not being done to their context. So we created a new framework, right? So we need to do that. So many of these standards are not realistic because they're trying to cover too much. If you measure 500 data points, you get no insight. In this part, I agree with the ESG critics. But that does not mean we throw away all these 500 data points. That part I don't agree with the critics also. What I'm saying is we need to measure the most important one or two and make sure we do them well. And rest ignore.
I'm with you. I'm with you on it. My only problem is, like I'm repeating here, that it is a framework for Mr. XYZ or Tata Power or whatever for you to adopt. It is a framework. If you follow this, then there are people out there who might be willing to give you better business.
So Rahul, let me answer your question in a very precise and direct way.
Yeah.
Each company should have the courage to create their own taxonomy, their own framework. Yeah, okay. Right? EU has created a taxonomy on ESG. They say this is how we define green, this is how we define ESG, carbon net zero, etc., etc. Right?
Yes.
And that's good. They're going to follow in their country.
Yes.
India should create its own taxonomy.
Okay.
Based on principles of life, based on principles of ESG.
Yeah.
And we should be bold enough. And I am going one step forward and saying that every company actually, if it has a vision of being a long-term company, should create their own taxonomy.
I completely agree
and framework and say this is what we follow. Coming back to your earlier example, we comply. You can comply with whatever, but then my ethics or the company's ethics are this. We take care of our welfare definition is this. This is how we take care of the welfare, which other cultures may not understand because they are not used to it. But so, here we have other metrics that are more important.
Some business, for example, my own business earlier, Srijan Technologies, for example, I may say I actually measure whether I have given equity to X number of people, right? And there is no benchmark for this.
Exactly.
I searched, by the way, when 10 years back when I was building my business, I searched on cooperatives. Is there a framework I could go and adopt? Actually, a framework would help. But a framework that here is how you could, for example, dilute equity and make others shareholders.
They should be suggestive frameworks.
Suggestive. But if they become forced upon me, that I'm just totally uncomfortable
100%. So the ideal would be in industries with a certain type and size of companies and certain technologies, we should have suggestive frameworks saying please use this, but please adapt it.
Fair enough.
It should not be prescriptive. It should be suggestive.
I agree.
And then people should adapt based on their condition because nobody can come and dictate. Like you sold your company and you had the good heart, you had your ethics to do it, but nobody was telling you. But that's your personal ethics. That's, I would say, truthful governance because it's something that you wanted to do to be in peace with yourself. That's it.
I mean, all of my life, generally, we were talking about Tatas has been inspired by JRD Tata. What comes from the people must go back to the people many times over. I don't think it went, I don't know if it was many times over or whether JRD Tata gave it many times over, but at the same time, at least it's, the only measure is that share what everybody is helping create. Essentially that.
And they've institutionalized it, by the way. So in my recent book, so the case study is about how they, Tata Sons, 2/3 shareholding is with Tata Trusts.
Okay.
And all the profit actually goes
to Tata Trusts. But that is a family-owned trust.
Yeah, but it's reinvested back in the society.
Majority of that. Sure. No, they hold a lot of. I don't know about that. I don't know about that. They invest in new businesses. So this is the other thing, right? And just sorry, a little deviation here. Milton Friedman says this very beautifully. He says all the rich people, when they get rich, see your whole point about income inequalities, all the rich people of the world do not sit with money under their pillows. What do they do with money? They basically go back and start new companies. And by the act of starting new companies, it's actually the money percolates. Wealth percolates and people get employment. There are other things that happen. So this whole paradigm of, say, living wage, allowing labor unions, these are detrimental things, in a very socialistic. When you go socialistic, there's a beautiful example. I'd like to share this with you. I want to show you this picture. You see this is from Thomas Sowell. So what's happening is that he's saying that traditional justice or fairness simply means people are judged by the same rules. But genuine equal opportunity cannot be achieved by this method. undeserved inequalities called for redress. What basically he's saying is, Thomas Sowell, that there are these civil society activists who are basically, via this term called social justice, delivering cosmic justice. Why are they saying that? Because life itself is unfair. It is unequal. If you and I are not equal, he and I are not equal, you know, and the life would collapse if there was equal distribution. The other thing he talks about is that when there is equality that has to be pushed down a society, governments, companies, someone must have the power in order to do that redress, right? There must be some authority which says, I will fix this. You guys have not been able to fix this. Because of you, there is so much inequality in the world. I'm going to fix it. My problem is when ESG comes and says that I'm going to fix it. And the people behind ESG who come and say I'm going to fix it. This whole notion in my view is humbug and is socialism, because somebody wants to come in and control our lives.
So that is greenwashing in my point of view, because ESG, so there are two aspects of this. Let's not go to any of the extremes, you know. ESG is a tool that completes the financial frameworks, right? We were talking about it earlier, that the financial frameworks are not accurate and realistic. They're not holistic. They're not complete. They are half the story. Okay. The other half of the story is if we start to holistic accounting, you know, environment cost, natural cost, social cost, governance. So ESG is a purak in a way. It completes the accounting world, completes the measurement world. So that itself is a great celebration, right? We should use that data.
Yeah,
right?
I am with you that we should measure. We should measure. We should have our own frameworks. We should have do good frameworks, but allow companies to take whether they want to follow it or not.
Exactly.
Suggestive.
Exactly.
But not coercive.
Suggestive but not prescriptive.
Not prescriptive, not coercive.
Exactly.
Right now ESG is coercive.
So some people have taken this, you know, this flag of making it prescriptive, thinking that they have the, you know, right to lay standards for others, which is not necessarily accurate.
It is not only prescriptive, Vipul, but it's going a step beyond that. It is coercive. It's basically saying that if you do not fall in line, Germany and German companies and whatever European companies will tell us, we're going to screw you up. We're not going to do business with you. Matlab, I find this coercive, right? This is, if you, tomorrow they will say, if you don't have a transgender person on your board, I will not work with you, which is, by the way, what BlackRock is doing. By this book, it's documented in this book, Snakes in the Ganga, that BlackRock has actually started doing that.
So that's not correct.